Yo, welcome back everybody to a video here on the second channel, and today I'm going to be doing a tier list looking at the Pokemon card 151 meta. Of course, 151 is coming out next Friday, so we are about a week out from the set releasing, and there's a lot of new archetypes to look at within the format, and there's actually enough new cards that make other archetypes a lot stronger with this new set, and it does shift the metagame a little bit, and I'm excited to take a look at it, because I was going to do a video looking at online tourney results for the past couple days, but honestly, there really wasn't anything special or crazy going on in the online tourney, so really wasn't really anything to look at that was cool. It was just kind of the same old, same old. But with Pokemon Card 151, we do have some new decks to look at, and I'm excited. We do have the early results in Japan to help base the list off of, on top of some early deck lists that Japan provided us over the past few months that 151 has been legal for. So we do already have these early results to look at, and I'm excited to see what is going to be good in our new set. And my opinions here on what will be good. Again, a lot of older archetypes get a little bit stronger with some of these new cards. Some decks just get a big boost of these new cards, and this is a decent time to kind of look and give some early predictions as to what the metagame might look like with the new set release and what new decks will offer into the meta. I will leave a link to this tier list down below if you want to go try yourself. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below and leave a like in the video if you're going to enjoy the video here on the second channel. And let's take a look at this tier list. Starting things off, I have Gardevoir. Now, Gardevoir, I think, does gain a few good cards. I think the big one is obviously Mew EX. I think Gardevoir is still probably a tier 1 deck going into the the Pokemon 151 meta. The deck doesn't really gain any like bad matchups. I guess like Charizard is maybe getting a little bit better with the new set. Miraidon is also going to get better, and Lugia will also be even better. So there is some debate for whether or not Gardevoir will be good, but Gardevoir to get top 8 in the Champions League. To be fair, we don't have Moonlight Hills yet. With the Moonlight Hill Stadium, Japan does have, and they used it in some of the lists in the top 8, but we don't have that. I do think that Gardevoir gaining Mew, though, is a really cool addition to the deck. If I were to play a Gardevoir deck in this meta, I would probably want to play a Mew in it. Mew's a really good attacker in the deck. The amount of attacks you get to copy is insane, and having the ability to kind of gain even more attacks within Gardevoir on just one card is kind of cool, because Gardevoir does have, a lot of really good attacks. It's got Memory Skip, it's got the Zacian, the Gardevoir, Shine Arcana. It's also got the Cresselia, but now we have Mew EX, which can be very good. Now against Gardevoir, if you're playing like Radiant Greninja, you're probably going to have to bench Manaphy now, because now Gardevoir has the ability to snipe with Greninja. There's a lot of really cool attacks that Mew can copy within Gardevoir, and I think Mew and Gardevoir is honestly a really good one-of addition in our new format. It might be another 2-prize liability, but in a lot of matchups, you will get a lot of value out of the Mew EX. I think it is worth playing within Gardevoir, and I think we're going to start seeing Gardevoir play Mew EX going forward, so I definitely think that's going to be something that Gardevoir will play, is Mew, and Gardevoir will still be a tier 1 deck. It's still just a very strong deck, and it's just obviously going to still be very good, in my opinion. Next up is Miraidon. Weirdly enough, I think Miraidon actually goes up to tier 1. Miraidon right now, you could argue is like maybe a tier 2, tier 1.5 deck on a nice enough day, but I think that with the addition of both Mew EX and the new Zapdos EX, I think Miraidon gets enough of a buff where it actually could shoot up to like a tier 1 deck. I mean, right now Miraidon is doing very good. I mean, it won in the Champions League. It almost won Pittsburgh. So the deck is clearly on the rise right now. And with some new cards in the new set, I think it gains even more power in our new format, becoming a potential tier 1 contender. I'm not even kidding on that. Like, that ain't sarcasm. I think Miraidon is legit that good. The addition of Mew EX is pretty good. And the new Zapdos forces you to have to start benching Manaphy against Miraidon. Because, like, before you play against Miraidon, you're not really benching Manaphy unless you know your opponent is playing Magnezone. But nobody really plays Magnezone right now in Miraidon, and that gives a lot of power for the Zapdos. And Zapdos is insane. It does 120 damage, and then does 90 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon on the bench with damage on them. So the Miraidon deck does play the Hawlucha to put the damage on them, and then if there's no Manaphy in play, you can just use Zapdos to knock out 2 Pokemon. Very good in those single prize matchups. Can be good to finish stuff off. There's decks out there that don't even play Manaphy anyways, so like that's going to be a big deal for Zapdos. So yeah, Miraidon gets 2 really strong new EXs that I think do make the deck a lot stronger, and I think Miraidon is looking pretty good in our new format and will probably continue to be a very strong deck in our meta. We'll have to see if I'm right about this, but I think Miraidon right now is in a very good spot, and with these new cards it has, I think it might actually shoot up to an actual tier 1 contender. Miraidon Regieleki is probably tier 3. I mean, yeah, you can play Zapdos and Mew in the Regieleki deck, but I think Miraidon Regieleki is just kind of inferior to just the straightforward Miraidon decks we've been seeing. Now we got to talk about Lugia. I think Lugia is another deck that gains a huge upgrade with 151, and that's mainly because it gains a lot of new attackers. For starters, we have the Colorless Lugia deck, which I think might become a tier 1.5 deck. Colorless Lugia right now, I think is just kind of hovering in like the tier 2, tier 2.5 category. I don't think the deck is like as good as it could be. I was going to play to Pittsburgh, and in testing, I found that I was losing to Single Strike Lugia and Miraidon, so I ended up playing Single Strike Lugia. And I still think that Single Strike might be the better deck over the Colors deck. But the Colors deck does have an extra bit of resources. You got the Snorlaxes. You're not worrying about, milling yourself with Tyranitar. You got the Mew EX, which is the big upgrade to the Colors Lugia deck. And Colors Lugia is doing really good right now over in Japan, which could mean that it could translate well over here. Now, there is a debate whether or not you'd still want to play Single Strike over Colors, because Colors does gain Mew EX. Mew EX is a massive upgrade to Colors Lugia, because now you have the ability to copy any attack. And any deck that plays Mew, especially if you're playing against a deck that uses Radiant Greninja, you're going to have to start benching Manaphy against Lugia now because of Mew EX being able to copy Greninja. So definitely Colors Lugia is going to be strong. But that's the thing, though. Colors Lugia is still slightly inferior to Single Strike Lugia, which I still think is actually a tier 1 deck right now. I think Single Strike Lugia is really good. And if you want to play Single Strike Lugia, it's still good. And I also think that you can just add a Mew EX into the Single Strike deck. Is Mew EX going to be necessary within Single Strike Lugia? Yeah, I think it's still worth playing. I mean, it's just that good of a card in Lugia. Why would you not play it? But yeah, if you want to just play Lugia, I still think Single Strike with Mew is probably going to be a bit better. But Colors does still have some advantages over the Single Strike build. The Single Strike build is a lot more powerful, has a lot more strength, does more raw damage, can take 1-hit KOs a bit easier, where the Colors build is a little bit more, sneaky with its plays. It's got the Luxray, the Radiant Charizard, the Weirdier, the Snorlaxes, which are super annoying to play against, especially when you're up against the Lost Zone deck. My issue with Colors Lugia, though, I think Colors Lugia might have a worse Miraidon matchup than Single Strike does, but I think Single Strike is still the better build of Lugia, but I still think Colors Lugia actually shoots up a lot with Mew, and I think that it's actually going to be legit now, and with its performances in Japan, I mean, hey, Colors Lugia might be the thing going forward. I want to talk about the idea of playing Lugia with Kangaskhan. Now, Kangaskhan is a really cool attacker that you can flip 4 coins, and it does 100 damage for each heads. And I like the idea of being able to just out of nowhere Kangaskhan your opponent and do like 300 damage and knock something out in one hit. On a 2-prize attacker, that could be pretty good. The idea of playing Kangaskhan in Lugia is kind of cute. I want to put in like maybe tier 3, because it's Colors Lugia with a Kangaskhan basically is what this is. And I do like the idea of Kangaskhan. I'm going to try it out. It could be fun to play. Well, there's no coin flip, reflip card in the meta. The idea of playing Kangaskhan and Lugia could still be decent. And again, out of nowhere, you get some KOs. Another cool version of Lugia that I have high hopes for is the Aerodactyl build of Lugia. I'm going to put that in tier 2. This is kind of feeling, I'm feeling generous today with all these new decks, but I think that the Aerodactyl idea with Lugia is actually really smart. So Aerodactyl's Devolution attack does 100 damage and then de-evolves your opponent's highest stage back into their hand. So the idea behind the Aerodactyl is you're playing against a deck that uses the X's like Charizard, Pidgeot, any of those EXs that evolve. The idea of the Aerodactyl is really cool because you can de-evolve it and then knock them out. So if you're ever up against an evolving EX deck, all you have to do is just hit it with Aerodactyl and do 100/80 damage, depending on whether or not you have a double turbo on, and you knock out the Ralts, the Curlia, you knock out the Charmander, the Pidgey, whatever you de-evolve them into, you knock out. Because Aerodactyl's damage is just enough to most likely knock those things out. The problem with Aerodactyl is you do have to play Old Amber Fossil to put into play. There is some synergy, though. You can use Lugia's V-Star power to actually put Aerodactyls into play, which is cool. There's unfortunately no synergy between Archeops and Aerodactyl. Like, you can't play Unidentified Fossil with Archeops and Aerodactyl. Now, that would have been really cool if you could. Unfortunately, you can't do that. You have to play the Old Amber Fossil with Aerodactyl, but I like Lugia Aerodactyl. I think this deck actually is legit, and depending on how many, evolving EXs start seeing play again, like if Charizard picks up in popularity and maybe more of those evolving EXs start becoming more common, having the Aerodactyl just means you have an easy time into them, because all you do is just knock out those, previous evolutions. You only get 1 prize for knocking them out, but you're still, like, de-evolving them and making it very awkward for the opponent. Being able to, like, knock out a super bulky EX is kind of insane, and I have high hopes for the ability and the idea of Aerodactyl Lugia. Next up are Chien-Pao. So Chien-Pao, Baxcalibur, I think is actually still decent right now. Probably still tier 1.5. The top 8 list from Pittsburgh is a pretty good list to go off of, and I don't think the deck really gains anything. And maybe, apart from maybe if you want to play a Lugia, or no, sorry, a Mew EX, a Lugia. Why would you put a Lugia in your Chien-Pao deck? A Mew. If you want to put a Mew in your Chien-Pao deck, you can. I think maybe that's the only addition that Chien-Pao gets with 151 is maybe just playing a one of Mew EX in the deck, because I think it's not a terrible card to play. It gives you draw, and you can attack with it. So, yeah. Chien-Pao Baxcalibur with a Mew could be good, but I really do like the top 8 list in our format. Chien-Pao just, I think, kind of stays the same. It's still a really strong deck. I think it's still very powerful, and yeah, maybe playing Mew is going to be the way, going forward. Play with a Mew. Next up is the Blastoise. Now, I'm going to put this in maybe good, question mark. We don't really have any results yet. I mean, we've seen some early deck lists from Japan, and some of them were winning, like, the gym challenges, whatever they're called. I do like the idea of Blastoise. Blastoise is very tanky. It's got 330 HP with an ability that makes it take 30 less damage, which gives it 360 HP. It can do 280 damage for 2 energy. The idea with Blastoise, you're either just going to play with Baxcalibur or Palkia, and the fact that this thing can do such high damage for low energy is what makes it good. It's also extremely tanky. It's very hard to 1-hit KO with that bulky HP that it has. It's actually going to be a huge titan of a Pokemon, and with its high damage output, I mean, it's knocking out the V-Stars. V-Guard doesn't work against Blastoise. With like a belt slash cleansing gloves, you can start knocking out Gardevoir and Mew, which is kind of insane. It is weak to lightning, though, which is a big issue, so you will kind of lose to Miraidon. But if you're already playing Palkia, you can just kind of play a prize race with Palkia anyways against Miraidon. It kind of works the same that way. But yeah, Blastoise looks like it's going to be a really cool archetype. So I'm going to put that in like maybe good, maybe even like tier 3, to be honest. Kind of like where like Lugia with like Kangaskhan is. Maybe it's actually a tier 3 deck. It is a cool idea, though, that I'm excited to see go farther in the format. Next up is Palkia, like the Palkia Chien-Pao deck without Blastoise, probably tier 2. Like the Palkia, Blastoise deck is really cool, and we'll have to see if it ends up doing good, because Blastoise has potential with its high damage output and then huge tank ability. But the straightforward Palkia Chien-Pao deck is also still pretty solid. I mean, Chien-Pao Palkia is a great deck without the Baxcaliburs, the build I'm talking about, obviously. And the deck's pretty strong. I don't think it gains anything with 151, whether or not you're playing Blastoise, but I don't think you're really playing anything else in the deck from 151. Maybe you're going to play a Mew, but you probably don't need to play Mew. So honestly, Blastoise, or Palkia Chien-Pao, sorry, is probably looking pretty good still in our format, and still probably a strong deck. You probably want to maybe play Temple of Sinnoh now with like the popularity of these Lugia decks over Lost City. Next up are Charizard decks. So I want to talk about the idea of playing Charizard with 151 Charizard. I'm going to put that in maybe good. So when 151 came out, all the Charizard EX decks were playing the Pokemon card 151 Charizard, which has the ability to do like 330 damage. It's really good in like the mirror. It's really good against big, bulky Pokemon like Urshifu and stuff. But I feel like as time has gone on, people have kind of realized that the Pokemon card 151 Charizard might not even be necessary within Charizard. It is also nice when you're playing against a grass deck to have a really strong fire attacker that can't really be KO'd that easily against a grass deck. So that was kind of the selling point behind the Charizard. It also can do like 160 damage for 1 energy. It's a really cool addition to the Charizard deck. The problem is, in order to really utilize it, you have to use 2 Charizards to kind of use it in one, because you have to evolve into this Charizard, and then you have to probably get another Charizard EX in play to accelerate energy onto it, and sometimes you might even have to try the Pogozard. It's just too much evolving of your Charmanders, and I don't know if that's going to be consistent enough to work. For now, I'm going to put the Pokemon card 151 Charizard in maybe good. I feel like it's not going to be necessary in our meta, but people are going to try out the 151 Charizard. I'm going to try out the 151 Charizard in, videos and stuff. So we're going to see if the 151 Charizard is worth playing in the Charizard EX decks. Whether you're playing it with Bibarel, Pidgeot, Lost Zone, or Gallade, whatever engine you're playing Charizard in, will it be worth playing the 151 Charizard on the deck is basically where we're getting at. Next up, we got the Charizard Gallade deck. Probably a tier 2 deck. So this deck got top 8 in the Champions League, and it's a really cool way to play Charizard. You're using the Curlias to draw cards. You have Celebrations Mew, Jet Energy, really easy engine to just find rare candies and everything. And you have the ability to accumulate a huge hand. You have Gallade, which gets you any supporter you want, which is kind of like a mini Pidgeot, where like instead of playing Pidgeot, just play Gallade, because when you're playing Pidgeot, a lot of the time you're just getting supporters anyways, and like Gallade can do that anyways, and it's a 1-prizer. And the deck also plays Reversal Energy, which makes Gallade an attacking option. So the deck is a cool deck, and it might be the best way to play Charizard right now. So we'll have to see if this Gallade Charizard deck that did well in the Champions League is going to translate well into our 151 meta. Charizard is looking decent. It's actually not bad against Mew EX. It can one-shot Mew EX. Mew's weak to Dark, and Mew doesn't really one-shot Charizard in return. So I think Charizard is going to be cool against Mew. So we'll have to see if the Charizard EX Gallade deck makes any moves. Then we got the Charizard Pidgeot deck, maybe tier 2, maybe tier 3 right now, kind of hovering. I'll be generous putting tier 2. I mean, it's the second, potential best way to play the Charizard right now. The Pidgeot engine is still inherently strong. It gives you a good setup. The Pidgeot is still just an insane card. And again, there's times where Gallade is going to be doing the same thing as Pidgeot anyways, but Pidgeot is still a strong card regardless, and you also get the Arceus V-Stars. So I don't know. I think Arc Pidgeot Charizard is still good, and if you want to play the 151 Charizard on the deck, you maybe can too. We'll just have to see if, this deck is also going to play the 151 Charizard. Which I guess this deck can afford to do that, because you have Arceus' V-Star power with Pidgeot, which makes it easy to kind of chain multiple Charizards in one turn to try to build it up a bit quicker. Lost Zone Charizard's probably tier 3. I mean, you could even argue that it's probably like a rogue deck. This Lost Zone Charizard deck, a lot of people are calling a meme, and it probably is a meme. It has some middling results in online tourneys and in Japan, but I don't think that Lost Zone Charizard is like that good of a deck. I think it's probably, if anything, honestly, it's probably just a rogue deck. Actually, it's probably not that good. Rapid Strike is looking good. I think it's a tier 2 deck right now. The thing with Rapid Strike is that it does gain some decent matches when you get evolution Pokemon in the format, but at the same time, with the popularity of Lugia right now, except for maybe Colorless Lugia, I think Rapid Strike is a bit better in a Colorless Lugia than Single Strike Lugia. And with Miraidon being popular, I think Rapid Strike's still okay. Still good against Lost Zone variants, which aren't going anywhere. Rapid Strike still is kind of a middle of the road deck. I do think that Mew might cause issues for Rapid Strike. Well, there is some debate over whether or not Mew will be good against Rapid Strike. The main debate is that Mew actually can't one-shot Urshifu. Even if you do end up Gale Thrusting with Mew for 300 damage, you're only doing 300 damage with Gale Thrust against Urshifu. And Rapid Flow only does 240, so Mew actually can't one-shot Urshifu, which is kind of funny. So we'll have to see if Mew EX ends up being a hindrance for Rapid Strike, because I think Mew VMAX and Single Strike Lugia is already a hindrance for the deck already, and then now we have this Mew in the format, which is splashable in so many different decks, but we'll have to see if Mew EX ends up being an issue for Rapid Strike. I don't know if it will be. It could be, because being able to copy Rapid Flow is kind of crazy. I mean, you can copy Rapid Flow, knock out Artillery, hit Urshifu for 240. There's a lot of really crazy plays you can make with Mew EX. Even if it's not one-hit KOing the Urshifu as easily, it's still a bit of an annoyance for the deck regardless. So I'll be curious to see if Rapid Strike ends up being good still, whether or not Mew EX hinders its performance. It did get top 8 in the Champions League, which does, I think, keep it in this tier list. I think Lost Tina still probably tier 1. Lost Tina, it didn't win Pittsburgh. It got top 8 in Pittsburgh, so its performance is there. It even bubbled out of Pittsburgh at 9th place, too. So the deck's got legs. It's still very popular in Japan, and I think Lost Tina's still fine. It does have to worry about Mew EX now, because now, all of a sudden, decks have this ability for Mew to kind of one-shot a Tina out of nowhere, which is a little scary for Lost Tina. But the deck is still probably pretty good, in all honesty. It's still a very strong deck. It can abuse Path. It's got Sableye, it's got Hand Disruption. It's still just a very strong, legit deck regardless. And I think that Lost Tina is still going to be perfectly fine in the meta, and still probably a tier 1 deck at best. Next up is Mew, probably tier 1.5. Mew isn't really respected right now. Nobody's really running Drapion, albeit maybe Miraidon. And then obviously Lugia is playing the single strike, Tyranitar, which is an issue. But obviously Mew is still decent. I don't think that it's a bad deck at all in the format right now. I think in the 151 meta, it's still fine. It doesn't really have to fear anything with Mew EX. Yeah, I think the deck's still fine in the format heading into the 151 meta. Still probably a good deck. And there's a lot of people that are just, sold on playing Mew right now. It just kind of stays the same. Next up is Arctur Umbreon. I mean, maybe we can put in tier 3. I was going to put in Rogue. I think Arctura is on the way out right now. I think that its matchup spreads is just really bad. It has a bad Miraidon, bad Chien-Pao. Probably has a bad Lost Tina matchup, obviously, and I think the only thing that it's going to gain with 151 is now that Lugia is getting a little bit stronger with the addition of Mew EX and all these other colorless attackers, maybe it's going to be worth playing Arctura again, but I really don't think Arctura is worth playing right now. I think that it's just falling off too much. I don't think it's very good right now in the format. There's too many decks that can kind of cheese it out, like Chien-Pao. I think Miraidon's still good against the deck, and I also think Lost Tina is a very bad matchup for Arctura. So I would just put Arctura in tier 3, and honestly, even in the Rogue category, the deck is still strong, and it can still win games. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's still a decent deck at best, but I don't think that it's gonna ever be any higher than tier 3 for the time being. Next up is Arcdrago. Probably tier 3 too. It's kind of like a worse Arctina deck. But Regidrago does have some inherent strength. Being the ability to copy all these dragon attacks is good. Copying Noivern could be kind of decent in the meta right now, especially with all these basics going around. So I don't know. I'm curious to see if Arc Regidrago is still something to look at. It's probably still a tier 3 deck though. It doesn't see enough play. Same thing with Arc Goo. And I guess Arc Pidgeot. Now, Arc Pidgeot is a deck that I think has potential. If somebody creates a really cool engine for Arc Pidgeot, I think the deck could go off, right? But I think right now we haven't really seen enough people explore with the idea of pairing Arceus with Pidgeot, where it hasn't been able to go any higher than tier 3. Still a cool idea, and I think same thing with Arc. Actually, Arc Pidgeot's probably Rogue, actually, not tier 3. It's probably Rogue. We haven't seen enough people experiment with it, but Arc Goose had some performances, doing decent in online tourneys. Arctina. So Arctina with Arctina Superior. Arctina's probably tier 2. Arctina Superior's, I guess, tier 2. They're basically the same deck. Charizard might get a lot better now that we have this Gallade build, which people are going to try out. Now that the 151 Charizard is out, maybe people are going to start playing Charizard EX more often now, and that could be good for Arctina. Arctina does have to worry about a few things. One, Arctina has to worry about Mew EX, which is going to be popular, and Arctina also has to worry about Lugia's popularity now, right? Which is a bad matchup for Arctina, especially both builds of Lugia, I think can be very awkward. I don't know. Arctina is kind of just a middle of the road deck right now. There's even a debate that the deck is probably tier 3. Like, I think the deck is kind of falling off a little bit. I think it's kind of lost its time in the spotlight. Maybe Arctina Pikachu might be a little bit better because you can, wall off these Lugia decks pretty easily. And maybe that's actually the way to play Arctina is going to be Arctina Pikachu over Arctina Superior. That might be the better way to play the deck right now. But right now, Arctina is just kind of a middle of the road deck, and maybe it's a tier 3 deck. It might even be that bad in the meta right now, in my opinion. And also, I think its Miraidon matchup is kind of miserable too. I think its Miraidon matchup isn't that good either. I don't know. Maybe tier 2 is a little too generous for the deck. Maybe Arctina Superior is probably tier 3, even with Charizard being popular. Next up is Lost Goodra, probably another tier 3 deck. It did do well in Japan's Champion League, and the deck can play Mew EX, which is kind of cool. So it now has like a little bit of a variety of attacks to choose from. You have like Cram, Zam, Sableye, Goodra, Mew EX. If you want to kind of go down that route of a toolbox approach, but I don't think that Lost Goo is going to make any waves right now. I mean, a lot of people kind of agree that Goodra's is kind of just a mid deck at best. Lost Zone Kyogre is probably tier 1. I think that the Kyogre is still very good. And with the addition now in the meta of Lugia being popular and Miraidon potentially getting even stronger with the new set, now there's more reason to play Kyogre now, right? Because it's so good into those decks. And Kyogre won Pittsburgh, and I think that's huge. Obviously, Kyogre requires a lot of skill to pilot correctly, but I do think that Kyogre is a good enough deck where maybe it's, going to be up there in the upper echelons of a tier 1 deck. Then, of course, we got Alakazam EX. So we have some new archetypes. We got Alakazam EX. I'm going to put in Maybe Good. Alakazam can play Mimikyu and can play Klefki and even like Snorlax, and it can attack from the bench. So it does have some really cool attacks. It can cop. It can, kind of sit behind. It's got some wall sit behind. It's got some cool attacks. It's a Maybe Good type card. I want Alakazam to be good. I want it to be a fun rogue deck in the meta. We'll have to see. I'm going to put it in Maybe Good for now because I have hopes for the deck that it could be something worth trying out. We'll have to see, though. We got Arbok EX, also another maybe good card. Arbok EX seems kind of cracked against Lost Zone decks and Gardevoir specifically. Being able to limit their hand is really good. As a late game comeback card, it has potential. And that's the thing too with Darkrai. So Darkrai and Arbok I think are both kind of maybe good. And you could play Darkrai with Arbok, or you can play Darkrai by itself. But I think Arbok and Darkrai are both kind of hand in hand, kind of similar things, because you can play Arbok within Darkrai. Arbok's ability to make your opponent's hand very small in combination with Iono and Roxanne and make him even have a 0-card hand is pretty deadly. And if Bibarel's not seen play, there's a reason to maybe give Arbok a try. I think Arbok is worth trying out. With the popularity of Lost Box, I think it's still decent. And, of course, with Gardevoir being popular, it's also good. And it also one-shots Mew EX. I don't know. It's still something to keep in mind. And Mew VMAX ain't going anywhere either, right? The Lugia matchup is probably going to be your hardest matchup, to be honest, because they'll have gift energy and stuff. But, I don't know. Arbok could be something worth trying out. Maybe good. Wigglytuff is also maybe good. It has the ability to have 350 HP if it has a special energy on it. And Path right now is kind of on the downswing. Some Miraidon lists do play Path. Lost Tina plays Path. Arc plays Path, but Arc is also on its way out of the meta. So Path is kind of being less and less popular right now, which is good for Wigglytuff's ability. And 350 HP is insane. That's a lot of health to have. And with the colorless box kind of build a Wigglytuff you can play, it actually could be something worth trying out. So definitely keep your eye on Wigglytuff for sure. Maybe good. Next up is DT Mew. DT Mew is probably tier 1.5. Both builds of Mew I think are actually pretty good right now. Nobody's really playing Spiritomb anymore, so that makes both builds of Mew probably just really good decks in our format right now, even in the 151 meta, which I think they'll continue to still be good. Then we got Venomoth. So I didn't really know where to put Venomoth with. I mean, there's a lot of ideas with Venomoth. Venomoth has an item lock attack, and on a 1-prizer, that's not bad, where Bayonet does the same thing, but Bayonet's not a 2-prizer. I think Venomoth is a cool idea. There are ways you can play Venomoth. It's a great way to slow the opponent down while you try to slowly, build up a board state or something, and that's kind of the idea of Venomoth. So we're going to put in a Rogue for now. Sableye Cramsard with Radiant Charizard, probably tier 2. I don't know if it's the best way to play Lost Box. It's not bad, though. It does have the ability to get to Sableye really quickly, and obviously Charizard, Radiant Charizard is a really strong attacker. The deck does have a lot of, kind of different ways it can be played, whether or not you want to play Milotic or Bibarel, or whether or not you want to play Pidgeot with Force Seal Stone. There are a few ways that the deck can be played, and the deck is still fine in our format. It's got a good Miraidon matchup. As long as you're just making sure you're benching Manaphy and stuff, the deck still kind of beats Miraidon very handily, in my opinion. Meowscarada's probably maybe good. I don't know. It's one of those decks that people want to be good. I don't know. We're gonna put Meowscarada maybe good. I don't want to disrespect Meowscarada because it's still a really cool deck, but it's maybe good. Turbo Lost Box obviously tier 1. I think both Turbo and Kyogre are kind of not the same thing because they both play differently and they both have different win cons overall. But I think both Turbo and Kyogre are both just still tier 1 in our new format. Also, Turbo Lost Box can play Mew EX now, which is a big deal. So that is also something that like Lost Zone decks can play, is Mew. Lost Tina, Kyogre, and Turbo can all play Mew EX, and that's a very big deal for those decks, right? So Tyranitar Dodrio, maybe good. Tyranitar finally has like a decent, engine with Dodrio. Dodrio not only is a very strong attacker if you pile damage on it, but it also fuels Tyranitar's attack. And Tyranitar being a lightning Pokemon isn't bad against Lugia, and it also does a lot of damage in general. It can be very good into like Miraidon and Palkia. I want Tyranitar to be good. I'm going to throw it in maybe good for now. Maybe it's a rogue deck, but the addition of Dodrio in the deck, it does give it some legs. And then we got United Wings. I mean, it's probably rogue. I mean, yeah, Gardevoir is out there, and Murkrow can hit Mew for weakness, and I guess, United Wings maybe is okay against Miraidon, and it's maybe okay against Lugia. But again, with those Lost Zones running around, it's a little sketchy. I think it also has like a bad Charizard matchup because you're just not able, you just can't win the prize trade against Charizard a lot of the time. United Wings is probably just a rogue deck. I want it to be good, man, but it's just, I think right now it's a rogue deck. But there you have it. That is the Pokemon card 121 tier list in action. Right now, I don't know if there's any BDIF. That's kind of the thing right now in our meta. With the way the format is, I don't know if there's a clear BDIF. You could debate there's a Lost Zone deck in BDIF, but right now I actually don't think there's like a BDIF heading into 151. Not clarified yet. I think Miraidon and Lugia stonks go way up now that Mew EX and Zapdos are a thing. There's going to be a little bit more, a couple more ways to play Lugia now, right? With like Aerodactyl, maybe Kangaskhan EX. Mew, obviously, big upgrade to Lugia. Lost Zone decks kind of stay the same. Charizard's starting to get a little bit more respect in Japan, and that might translate over into us. We do have some new archetypes with Arbok, which could be pretty annoying to play against, and Alakazam could be another really cool deck that I want to see Alakazam do well. Tyranitar might finally have a home. Arc decks are really falling off right now, so that's just kind of the meta right now, in my opinion, heading into Pokemon card at 151. And, of course, Peoria. We'll have to see with the online tourney results what happens in our format. I'm excited to look at the online tourney results for Pokemon 151, so I'm excited to see what happens then. But that'll be it for me on the second channel. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you're new to the channel, of course, subscribe down below. Help me on the road to reaching 8K subs here on the second channel. And yeah, that'll be for me with the Pokemon card 151 meta. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see y'all later. I'll leave a link to the tier list down below if you want to go try it yourself. Bye-bye.